Welcome back in Rob Black and Your Money. I'm Rob Black. This is a show that has a little bit of investing, a little economic talk, a little bit about how much do you need for retirement. I say 10 to 20 times your income. That's just a ballpark, depending on how you plan to spend in retirement, how your health's going to be in retirement. If you want to leave an inheritance, we talk about estate planning. But one area that's super important is real estate. In my early 20s, it was an intimidating process. I bought a house in my 20s, my 30s, my 40s, and my 50s. I plan to buy one more home, and I should probably be about done. Um, I'm not one of those people that has to be a landlord or a real estate developer. I also own stocks and I also own bonds. And guess what? I like them all the same. Joining me now, Scott Thompson, Mr. Mortgageman. MrMortgageman.com is his website. MR Mortgage, MORTGAGE, man.com, MrMortgageman.com, Scott Thompson, friend of mine, someone you could trust to get your loan done, someone who will stay on top of the job because it is a bit of a process. I actually wanted to ask you a question, Scott, about give me an example of one of your more recent loans that you've done. As I always find everyone's scenario is a little bit different and their stories are always kind of interesting.
Yeah. I actually had a recent client. It was a pretty good story. A first-time home buyer. She had limited monies for a down payment. A teacher who grew
Okay.
up in the Sudan. So she didn't
Wow.
even grow up in the United States, but she had that dream of owning her own home.
Now, growing up in Sudan, there's no barriers to that because she's probably U.S. citizens, my guess. I grew up overseas, and maybe I have a different opinion on real estate, but keep going with your story. I want to hear more.
Well, what made it interesting or a challenge is, I mean, it's one thing to want to buy a house, but she had really limited assets. So she'd saved, but she had about 11,000 in the bank.
Wow, that's not
But
much.
no, and married, but interestingly enough, didn't want her husband to help in any way. She wanted to buy the house.
Huh.
Um,
And
so
not because she wanted to like get a divorce and take the house and run. She wanted to be on title. She didn't trust him. He wasn't a deadbeat dad. It's just she wanted it for other reasons.
yeah, she wanted to do it herself.
Okay.
And
Now with $11,000 down, and I think you said she's an educator slash teacher. Um, that can't be like a high income in my general head. How much could she afford?
well, her realtor had the exact same question. And
Okay,
so,
that's a good question.
like I have all my clients do, it starts with filling out the loan application. So I got insight to all her finances, her income, and what we found is she could really, afford a home a little over 300,000, which
Okay,
in the Bay Area could make finding something really a challenge.
that's right.
And then the other part is you need money not just for the down payment, because she was a first time home buyer, you know, could be as low as 3%. But then you still have to factor in, you have closing costs that you have to be able to afford. So I set up a mortgage planning call with her, and she had tons of questions. Um, she filled out the application, and after doing both of that and some due diligence on my part to see if there was any options out there for her, uh, I was able to get her pre-approved to buy a home at, at 340,000. She could put 3% down, and I was also able to get her some down payment assistance, about $15,000, four of which was gift, meaning she didn't have to pay it back.
Yeah,
And this enabled her the opportunity to go out there and her real estate agent to go find her a home.
that's pretty cool. DPA, what's that mean? What's that stand for again?
Down payment assistance.
See, I didn't even know that's a thing. That's the funny part about me because I think about me and my world, my orbit. But down payment assistance might work for medical and healthcare, law enforcement, firefighters, paramedics, medical technicians, teachers. Good, sweet. We're finally taking care of our teachers in our society. School administrators even qualify. So, but you got to know where the programs are. Scott, how do you find those programs? Because they're not exactly on the cover of the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or reliable financial information publications that I read.
Sometimes it's just starting with Google.
Okay.
More probably in this situation, speaking to a loan officer like myself who knows where to look. Um, there was one in particular, GSFA, which stands for Golden State Finance Authority. Um, it's a local finance authority for California, been in existence for over 29 years, helping people of low income typically to afford, you know, getting a home.
Right.
And this particular one just worked out perfectly because she was a teacher.
I always thought I was going to marry a teacher when I was a younger man, but it didn't work out quite like that. But that's how much appreciation I have for teachers. Now, you told me that when you basically finished this loan, this package, you got a little emotional. That probably doesn't happen with the tech executives. It probably doesn't happen with the medical sales equipment mortgages that you do. But every now and then when you get to help a person that helps our children, it's pretty special, isn't it?
It was amazing. She, throughout the process, there was just tons of communication. Partly she was nervous and I had to help her feel
Yeah.
comfortable with the process. Two, when we got to the finish line, her agent, which I thought was really cool, invited me to her new home, a home in East Oakland, but Oakland, and to give her keys. And I don't go to every single
Yeah.
time, but this particular one, I think it's just when you see it in people's eyes, the sincere appreciation. I got to tell you, there was some tears, and she was just so happy and proud to be in her home.
I once got invited to a housewarming party of someone very similar. She was a young woman in her 30s. She'd been looking for a house and she couldn't afford. I'm like, just get a townhouse and later on in life, sell it and get a house, single family home. So she invited me. But what I quickly learned, Scott, was that she invited me because I have a good paid job and she invited all of her single friends. I was like, oh, I see what this is all about. But you got the heartwarming story. I got suckered into, do you like any of my friends? Anyway, it's Scott Thompson. He gets mortgages done. You can find him at changemortgage.com. That's the company that he works for. But you can also find him on his website, mrmortgageman.com. That's mrmortgageman.com. No underscores, no spaces, nothing like that. It's just mrmortgageman.com. If you are an educator, if you are a firefighter, if you are a teacher, if you are a tech executive, a medical salesperson, a nurse, contact Scott. Find him at mrmortgageman.com. Thanks, Scott. Let's move on now. Sticky inflation. Yesterday, the Fed's reserves, Raphael Bostic, added to the narrative by doubling down on the stickiness of inflation. Says we have, quote, still ways to go. Curb the price of growth in the past few months / years. He wants to see a reduction in the breadth of inflation pressures, which are still quite high in his mind. I think the Fed is fighting it until we see weakness in jobs or until something bad happens to a company out of the blue or a financial services institution. I think maybe one rate cut this year, optimistically two, realistically one, and then maybe 1 to 2 next year, same kind of scenario. That's okay because the economy is doing pretty well. Now, again, go and tell that to the person who's having problems paying their groceries or who have late fees or who went to see Garfield or Furiosa this weekend. I would be pretty angry if I saw either one of them. Furiosa got great reviews. Garfield got horrible reviews, but I think in California, we have better things to do with our time. Speaking of better things to do, Abercrombie and Fitch is crushing it. It's actually thumped the returns of NVIDIA in the last 12 months. That's pretty impressive. The retailer that used to hit up on mall trips just to smell the clothes They reported its strongest first quarter earnings ever yesterday, cementing its comeback. Their full year outlook, they're going to grow their sales 4 to 6%, maybe up to 10%. That tops analysts' expectations. The clothing stocks chain is up in the last 52 weeks, 500%, more than double NVIDIA's. Now, again, if I were to tell you a year ago, Abercrombie & Fitch, I didn't. You know why? Because I don't follow it. NVIDIA is still very much so a port and storm for tech stocks. But the tech rally has basically been going on since October, November, January, December, October, November, December, January, February, March. Take the month of April off. Start back up in the month of May. We need a pullback, ladies and gentlemen. We need a pullback. It tends to happen during the summer months, or it can happen during the summer months, and it tends to happen in between earnings season. And while we're looking at the inflation data and waiting for rates to come lower, if we got one, I'd be thrilled. 5%, not enough. 10%, I'm kind of excited. 15%, ooh, 20%. Now we're talking. What do we get? 5, 10, 15, 20? I don't know. If I had that answer, I'd be placing bets at the track, and I don't have that answer. But historically, we're due for a 10 to 20% pullback sooner rather than later. 10% would be very, very normal. You can find me online at robblack.com. You can find Scott Thompson at mrmortgageman.com. If you want to come to an event, Pints and Portfolio, next month, June in San Mateo, talk about your portfolio, sign up at robblackshow.com. That's robblackshow.com.